Hi, guys and ladies, welcome back to another episode. This is episode number 7. Last week we spoken about on episode number 6, we spoken about the data science route, different roles that you find on the data science field itself. This episode we're going to be talking about the business intelligence roles. Actually, out of the 7 roles that we spoke about, the 3 roles are actually quite synonymous also with business intelligence. So the question that you might be asking yourself is, should I set up a data science team or should I set up a business intelligence team? Given that some roles are actually sharing each other, the answer to that depends on the type of analysis that you want to do. But before we get into that, let's just talk about the different roles that you are seeing, 3 of these roles that you are seeing in business intelligence, just after our theme song. When I first joined the data area back in the late 2000, there was never a need for all these various, definitions on who's what. I think the common name was either you become a SQL developer or a data analyst. And at one point, if you do make it, sometimes you would be called a business analyst. But nowadays, we see various different roles that actually falls part of the BI or the data science team. And sometimes if you are starting out, you might be asking yourself, which one should I fit in? And if you are the manager and you just got promoted and you just joined the data um, team or the field, you're more like also asking yourself, where should I start hiring? What am I looking at? And with all of that, it all depends on what is it that is the business requirement and what is it that you want to solve. Especially seeing nowadays that we just don't have a centralized big data team that everybody else, you just come to this 1 or 2 people. But now you're seeing a data team that's more like it's one big function, but you get little teamlets or squads that are dealing with particular subject itself. A squad might be one that's dealing with probably credit card or products just like personal loan, or a product like overdraft. You might have a little squad in there, but then you find yourself that, why is it that in every squad you have the same job titles? And with that, let me just try to explain it on this video, especially on the business intelligence side of things. So we're going to be talking, like I said, we're going to be talking about a few roles. They're actually quite more than that, because you could have data engineers, you could have data analyst, you could have business analyst or process analyst, and you can also have Power BI or Tableau visualization specialist. But it all depends on what is the need. So for me, as far as today is concerned, we're going to be talking about the 3. We're going to be talking about the first one, which is a data engineer. Let us understand what is a data engineer and why do we need a data engineer. Second one is a data analyst. Let's understand what is a data analyst. I know in episode number 6 we spoke that data analysts, they run between different areas or different stages of data science. But in this side, when you are only doing business intelligence, what do you expect from a data scientist? And the last one that we're going to be talking about is your business intelligence, whether it's going to be Power BI or it's going to be Tableau, it's going to be any of those other tools, the visualization specialist. And what would you want to see from this type of person? So each squad that deals with a particular product or particular field or data, whatever it's going to be, HR is going to be finance, is going to be marketing. You might find yourself having these 3 people all the time in every little squad. So you have one squad, marketing squad, 3 people, finance squad, three people, three people, three people. But in there, you have a whole lot of maybe 10 data engineers, you have 10 data analysts, you have maybe another 5 or 10 visualization specialists, because each one could, they can specialize in their own squatting. But let's start with the first one, data engineer. So a data engineer, they go out, they source, they organize, and they move data between systems. So they are the guys that are responsible for doing type of things that has to do with data storage and infrastructure. So their core competencies depends on number one, which is ETL, which is extract, transform, and load data. It could be coming from different feeds. The most common one, I think, it will be unstructured, like CSVs and whatever. He's bringing them all together, or she's bringing them all together into a centralized area using what we call ETLs. Number two is data warehouse creation to store all data that is needed into the business. A data warehouse help users access everything else in one place, thus eliminating the need for them to do their own ETLs. So the first one, remember, this person does, or she does, ETLs, and then once you put them together into this place called the data warehouse, it eliminates all the business users from creating their own ETLs, and that's the reason why this whole thing called data warehouse is quite needed. The third one is for data governance, which is quite important for security reasons, so that you can know that the data integrity is in place, the data follows this quite rules. So the data engineer could also be able to help us with that one. And the fourth and the last thing is that they have data system knowledge, especially when it comes to mastering the data and understanding all the structures that are out there. They would be the people that know very, very well about it. So there are different type of database systems that are out there. I'm just going to be looking at the 4 different type of database systems that most data engineer would know about, and they would probably advise you to whichever one that you want to do. So the first two are for computer analysis, and the other two are for human analysis. So the ones that are more like computer analysis, you're looking at something like something like an online transaction processing, or OLTP. We've heard of this word OLTP several times. Those ones could be probably for a computer to actually be able to gather data and come in. Same as something called the data lake. Could be used for just consuming, because when you are a human and you go into the online transaction processing system or whatever database, it is very difficult to understand, but the computer is quite easy to understand. That same is a data lake. But for us, for normal analyst, or which has data analyst, or whatever type of analyst, or even the business itself, they rather make use of this thing that we already alluded to, called the data warehouse. And the second one is called the data mart. So out of those four, your data engineer will be the one that tells you to say, oh, I see your data is normally coming in a form of an online transaction processing type of a thing, whether it's text is coming through quite frequently or whatever the case is. I suggest that we do that, and then we do it consuming this way. Online transaction, OLTP, is a type of data that's processing, that's consisting of several transactions that occur currently. An example of that could be your online banking transaction, your shopping transaction, order, stuff like that, or your text messages. If you want to, find or analyze type of analysis, it's data that comes at the same time, comes concurrently, goes boom all onto you. It's we normally looking at that. It's called the online transaction processing, and this type of data system allows you to be able to enter the data, to modify the data, and be able to delete or read the data. That's why it needs a special way that it could be stored. A data lake, on the other side, nice part about it, a data lake is it can handle both unstructured data, structured data, and semi-structured data. So structured data is the one that comes in a form of a list, or it comes in a form of a table, like what we have SQL tables. We call that structured data. Unstructured data is the one that comes, it's like phone conversation, just like this conversation, for instance, or our emails. That is data, but it's in a form that is unstructured, because we can't say, can you can you link this to that? It's and all of that. If you have all these different type of data, you have one that is structured, you have the other one that is not structured. The best way to store it is to store it inside what we call a data lake. On the other side, for the human one, we put all this data together to enable people for analysis. We call that the data warehouse, or DW, and then we put it together to be specific, like say for instance for marketing or for finance. Then we start to call that a data met. So a best person to tell you which one is good for your business or is good for your team would be this person called a data engineer. And yes, like you guessed it, most of the time they use this programming language called structured query language, SQL. So they would be the one that writing SQL codes. They can be able to help you manipulate the data. Sometimes they can give you access to the data itself, whether it's something called views or something, some little APIs that they can give you access to your own data, that they work on it, and then you as the business, you can plug in to whatever you're working on using the API. So that's that thing. And when it comes to SQL, I know a lot of people are afraid of going and understanding SQL. SQL is actually quite easier. There are complex ones that you can do. There are easier ones which are quite simple, like the insert, the select, the delete, the update type of thing. If you really, really just want to understand a little bit of SQL, I would totally suggest the w3schools.com. That's how I learned my SQL, considering that my software engineering book only had 2 pages, 2 chapters on SQL. So I needed thorough knowledge on SQL. So I went into the W3 schools. The common tools that they use depends on whatever they are looking for. And most of them the data engineers could include for data storage, for cloud storage, for coding languages, for big data, and also for live streaming. And the ones that are for local storage itself, they are looking at maybe probably using Microsoft Server Management Studios. They're looking at Oracle. They're looking at SAP. And they're also looking at SES, because SES is also quite familiar in this case and quite helps even more than just a local type of database. For the ones that are on the cloud, because nowadays, I mean, the cost of having your own hard drives in house, it's becoming quite more expensive. And that whole thing of online, what it used to be in the early 2000s with latency, it has gone back. I mean, you send something, it comes back almost instantaneously, because faster connections are becoming cheaper. And that creates the need for the online storage, the cloud storage. You can just easily, I think right now is quite easy. You can just go into either Google Cloud Storage, Azure, Microsoft Azure, or even Amazon Web Services. You get your free account and you can start storing your databases in there. Whether they give you 5 gig or whether they give you 500 megabytes or 1 gig, I mean, it's good enough for most small businesses that they can run their business just from that small thing. I mean, if you run your own restaurant business or you're running your own bed and breakfast type of business, that's good enough for you to start running your business that side. But when it comes to like I said, programming language, either of those online storage can still allow SQL to be run through, Python to be run through, or something called Scala, another programming language that has to do with data. Once now you graduate and you're like, oh, my data is now becoming bigger and bigger, and you need something called big data. The data engineer will also be able to help you out, store it in the big data areas like Hadoop, Sparks, Databricks, or stuff like that. And for live streaming data, which is like I normally say, the tweets or the SMSs that are coming through, you can't stop it. They just keep on coming. You can use stuff like Kafka, PubSub, Kinesis DS, and Apache Beam to handle such all of those things. But now I remember now when I start to talk about stuff like Hadoop, you're thinking to yourself, oh, isn't that already in the data science field? No, it's not, because remember, we're talking about a data engineer. They must know big data and how to handle it. They're not just continuing with analysis themselves or doing those advanced analytics on the data. They're just helping you store the data and communicate effectively, reducing latency and stuff like that on the data itself. Whether it becomes live data or it becomes a snapshot of a data, becomes small data or it becomes big data, data engineer would be the one that can give you a proper way or a proper ideal way of engineering your data to make sure that it's staying perfectly. The second role that I quite like is the data analyst. So a data analyst, like we said the last time, they like to do the analysis that we normally know of and we have all found of. They are quite easier to get hold of this type of people. Like data engineers, they also specialize in things like ETL, so they can run the ETLs, importing data from stuff like Excel, Microsoft Excel files, CSV files, databases, and transforming it into a whatever desirable format they're looking for. And they load data into models also. They can create their own data models. So a model would be, if you are having different type of tables, table 1, table 2, table 3, you put it together, you mix it up with that one, you convert the data in this way, you do all of those things, all of those steps that you're doing, we call it that data model, because you are modeling it to how you want to consume it. They can also calculate some matrices by writing formulae and calculate, do some business rules. And they also have, their own set of, data transformation tools, or their little library that they can put into the data to say, once we have the data model, it must actually get all these rules before you get a view or some sort of a data stream or API, whatever that goes out. They can also create like all these models and make sure that they update automatically, like we have spoken about it. So a data analyst actually does a lot of things. Even though he might not have a thorough knowledge of like a data engineer of what is the best solution for data, but in terms of, if you already have your own data in your own little server or your databases, you can just reach out to a data analyst and say, I just want insights from there. I just don't want prediction, just want to see what's happening. So for that, like in the field of business analysts, that's why we're talking about what have happened in the history. A data analyst will be able to help you out with that. The common tools that are being used by the data analyst includes my favorite, Microsoft Excel. They can also write in VBA, also a Visual Basic tool, and they can also use Microsoft Access if they want. So those are just the simple one. Besides that, they can use SQL Server, and they can use Power Query if they're thinking like, okay, maybe you need hardcore coding methodology, whatever the case is. And besides that, the others are now efficient or proficient with Tableau and Power BI and Power Pivots and like I said, Power Queries, or even platforms like Click, R, and Python. And when you're talking about such tools, you can see they're now getting very, very closer to the other guy called, or the other girl called, a data visualization specialist. So a data analyst can manipulate the data, create the models, and can do a little bit of visualization, but is probably, they could be specialists, but not really like hardcore specialization, like this visualization specialist would do. So the third one would be, discussing this guy called, or this girl called, data visualization specialist. So like we said, visualization specialist focuses on turning clean data into visuals that helps communicate the message and help answer a specific question. So it's about, now they're not looking for data, where to store the data, how it should be stored. They're just saying, oh, hang on a second, you have the data. I see the graph that data analyst is giving me. Actually, probably we can use maybe a Sankey diagram to show where the fall offs are coming in. You can see the people are coming this way, but a Sankey diagram will actually try to show you what path do they take when they go into our online store. So once you get there, you need this guy who's called a data visualization specialist, because they specialize in this case. The key competencies includes, creating data visuals that highlights the key data points or trends, and also focuses on one or few matrices. And they also create dashboards by combining multiple visuals into one, in a way that it tells a story. So for instance, you have 17 other graphs. They can pick from those 17 graphs which ones are the key 5 that when you land or when you get an email, that's already your dashboard, and you can know how the business is going, and what those dashboard becomes handy, especially for the operations team as well as the Menco team. They are quite good in communicating results and presenting to audiences in management meetings, and manage audience permissions. The way that I used to manage permissions that I love so much is row level security, and you can do all of those things as a visualization specialist. The last thing that they can do is getting the audience feedback. And the audience, when they give them feedback, they telling them what will they want to see getting improved and how would they want to see it. In my case, I used to have a monthly meetings. Every time when after we do our finance stuff, I would also create our own meeting to say, guys, it's already time for our 3-year plans. What would you like to see? What didn't you like? Most of my financial officers, because of how we used to do things, they loved Excel so much. So they would say, can you do everything else in Excel? So I would start to write a little bit of VBA code, make sure that it fits back into the database without them having to do too much. They take whatever their budgets are, press the button goes to the database. I can see the data as it coming through. And in that time, I'm sitting with the finance menco and the finance exec, which was the CFO for group technology. And they can see these dashboards updating as people are submitting. And they can pick up the phone and say, financial officer A, your numbers are wrong. You've captured a credit instead of a debit. And they can make the changes. They press the button, it goes through. We can see. So I would spend more time on analyzing what are we getting than spending more time, uploading and coding this stuff. So it's how efficiency I had found that once you have built the data models under the data analyst role, you make sure that they maintain themselves. Then you can spend more time on the visualization side of things, becoming a data visualization specialist, so that you can help your audience, which is the menco or the exco at this time, to say this is what it's supposed to look like. So just in summary, I think over the years, in the last over 10 years, the data world has totally changed, and it's getting much more exciting. There's been a lot of tools that are coming out. When I first started, I never knew of stuff like Tableau, Power BI. They only started now in 2005, 2015. And mind you, I joined in 2009, 2010. So all this other time, the only tool that I knew that I'm supposed to know was, knowing Microsoft SQL. And that's why probably I'm talking so much about Microsoft SQL, because it was the only thing that we knew as a data person. There's no ways you have to know how to write a query for data that cannot fit into a normal Excel workbook. And from there, then it's becoming easier. It's becoming even more nicer today than it used to be back then. So I think it's easier now to start out as a novice analyst, and you can actually do stuff that I used to do as a after many years of experience. You can actually do quite easily, very at this point right now. So thanks guys for looking at for tuning into episode number 7. And episode number 8, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back, not make it a little more hectic or technical. I'm going to be talking about, now if you were to start today, what are the 5 things that you probably could do to actually get yourself a career in data? I've gotten some few questions. People were asking to say, I'm still a student, I'm jumping jobs, how do I start into analysis? And I found I've done 5 different things on my side that I think that they could be quite useful, that you can do them and then you start your career in data itself. So see you guys we'll chat again in episode number 8. So stay blessed.